the panic was still going on inside the building. The people began to think that someone had deliberately done all this and caused them to go bankrupt, and right after that, the building experienced an earthquake and the area that belonged to Pandora at this time would turn into the Golden Palace. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who saw his plan this time, managed to smile happily. Slowly golden light began to appear from the building and made everyone happy. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who saw his plan this time, managed to smile happily. Slowly golden light began to emerge from the building and made everyone panic because suddenly the bomb formed in the building trapped them all, after which the statue of Seo Joo-Heon and the building with Roman architecture began to rise. Everyone inside was surprised to see the building that trapped them now, and the building was a typical Roman Colosseum that was majestic and so large it was built there trapping everyone. The people became frightened, and from behind the iron door appeared people from the center of Pandora. They were all confused because they met other Pandora members, and they were also confused because there was someone who deliberately made a tomb to gather them all here. A voice that came from Seo Joo-Heon distracted them. Seo Joo-Heon began to attend to the people there through the list given by Edward. And Seo Joo-Heon smiled when he found the name of the honored guest there. Richard Jang, along with 267 other members of Pandora, had gathered in Seo Joo-Heon's Colosseum. An angry Richard tried to use his relic, but immediately the relic exploded. Then there was a sound from the relic of the owner of the Golden Place. Nero looked angry at Seo Joo-Heon because he had gathered people who knew nothing about art into his Colosseum. But Seo Joo-Heon flattered Nero and asked him to teach those people about art. Seo Joo-Heon was satisfied because he saw Nero, who was happy because he was praised by Seo Joo-Heon, and Seo Joo-Heon told Nero to activate something. An earthquake occurred under the people's feet, and a notification window said that the Golden Palace was now under the power of Seo Joo-Heon. And with that, slowly a tall and solid wall appeared in front of the people down there, and a maze was created by the will of Seo Joo-Heon. Richard and everyone there panicked because suddenly a labyrinth was created in front of them. But Seo Joo-Heon said that this was not an ordinary labyrinth because this labyrinth was created by Nero with the power rock of Irene, which gave disaster in the labyrinth. Some people there screamed when they found monsters and various other disasters. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw some people who were accidentally trapped in the maze, felt sorry and happy. They had to enter the maze in order to get out safely from the Golden Palace. But Seo Joo-Heon had a condition where people who had entered had to pay a fee of 50 million won. And immediately they were surprised when they saw their account balance being forcibly withdrawn by Seo Joo-Heon. They all protested because they never did anything bad to Seo Joo-Heon. But Seo Joo-Heon said that he did this because Pandora had done something bad to one of his friends, Gunwoo. And since all the relics would be in the hands of Seo Joo-Heon, then they had to pay him for having the relics without his permission. And Seo Joo-Heon smiled happily now. Richard, who heard that, could not believe what Seo Joo-Heon did. And Seo Joo-Heon told them to move quickly if they wanted to get out of the maze. But one of the people there made an offer if he would pay more money to Seo Joo-Heon to let him out. And the people there began to be instigated and began to offer their offers to Seo Joo-Heon. There were some people who would pay Seo Joo-Heon with information and money. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, just smiled a little at how the person made an offer to him. And Seo Joo-Heon agreed to their offer, but with a note: if the information provided must be favorable to Seo Joo-Heon. The people began to shout and give information about various valuable things, and even some of them would reveal the secrets of Pandora. Richard, who saw it, was upset and scolded them not to do what Seo Joo-Heon wanted because he knew that Seo Joo-Heon would never let them out. Richard also suggested that they enter the maze and start working together. But of course, entering the maze would be very risky and dangerous. Richard scolded the people and made them flinch. But the quarrel began because they knew that Richard would use them for his own benefit, and would later make excuses so that he could avoid the accusations he made by hurting others. And the person who quarreled with Richard confronted Seo Joo-Heon and wanted to reveal the secret of Richard doing illegal activities. And some of the people there were also thinking the same thing and wanted to spill the beans about Richard. Seo Joo-Heon put on a laugh as he was satisfied with what they were going to say. Irene became a little doubtful if they had gotten a good thing this time. Seo Joo-Heon explained that getting information and money is important, but they can quickly get it all back. But if they start fighting with each other and leaking each other's secrets, then their harmony will be destroyed, and it will take a long time for them to rebuild a good relationship with each other. Seo Joo-Heon took out his mobile phone and started recording all of them talking about the information, and beyond his expectations, they easily gave information and talked about the secrets and badness of Richard. While Richard, who felt cornered, defended himself by telling the secrets of Seo Kwon along with his badness. And after that, everything became chaotic because they started to leak the secrets of other friends and made them fight each other. Meanwhile, Nero looked at them with a pitiful look and said that if they had to enter the maze that he made. Seo Joo-Heon, who had already got what he wanted here, left together with Irene. But when the people were about to protest to Seo Joo-Heon had disappeared from their sight. Nero conveyed the message from Seo Joo-Heon to them and forced them to enter the maze he made with his fire. Richard, who knew that the end would be like this, cursed all those who defected before, and they all entered the maze. Will they survive? What will Seo Joo-Heon do with the information he got? The video taken by Seo Joo-Heon had previously been reported by a TV broadcast, and this news became very hot when the content revealed the crimes and corruption committed by Pandora so far. And the TV broadcast also reported that Pandora had tried to monopolize all the spears in this world. Meanwhile, George, who saw the news at that time, became surprised and confused, because he saw the citizens who began to protest against Pandora in front of their headquarters. George got a call from Seo Joo-Heon and he said that he had seen the news on TV. Seo Joo-Heon smiled because George had seen the news. Seo Joo-Heon said that a lot of important people in Pandora had been fired because of the video, and Seo Joo-Heon again offered that Jorga wanted to be part of Pandora. But George still refused because he didn't have time to worry about that kind of thing. Hearing that, Seo Joo-Heon sent a video and asked George to see it. Someone was seen in the video saying the secret behind Irene's sick parents, and it turned out that it was the work of someone named Austin Rockefeller. Irene was also seen with her angry face after hearing the confession of the person, and Seo Joo-Heon, who tried to calm Irene there. After that, the video was finished. George, who saw that, was surprised to hear that, and he asked Seo Joo-Heon to explain about all that. Seo Joo-Heon also said that it was a video footage that he cut before he spread it to the internet. And he also said that Austin was still inside Pandora now. Seo Joo-Heon also said that Pandora had done some wrong things. Seo Joo-Heon didn't care because all he wanted was to find Tomb, and Seo Joo-Heon instigated George to go in and steal information from Pandora. George finally agreed to the proposal from Seo Joo-Heon, but George asked for the name of the person in the video. But Seo Joo-Heon told him that he only had to deal with Rockefeller because Seo Joo-Heon had killed the person in the video with the maze, but it seemed that Seo Joo-Heon felt that he only made George a little guilty by telling him. Seo Joo-Heon also suggested that George should bring people he trusts because it will be very beneficial for George in the future. George agreed to that and turned off the call from Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon was happy now that he managed to make George become part of Pandora so that he could get a lot of information. Seo Joo-Heon went back to his house, and when he tried to turn the doorknob, he heard a scream from inside his house. It was Irene, who was angry and tried to be stopped by Yoo Ji-ha. Yoo Ji-ha was grateful when he saw Seo Joo-Heon had returned and asked him to stop Irene. Meanwhile, Irene, who saw Seo Joo-Heon in front of her without hesitation, immediately lunged at Seo Joo-Heon's body. Yoo Ji-ha, who saw Seo Joo-Heon falling because of being pushed by Irene, was a little worried. Irene was seen hugging Seo Joo-Heon on the floor, and Irene slowly sniffed Seo Joo-Heon's neck, and it managed to make Yoo Ji-ha surprised. And after that, the embarrassing thing happened in front of Yoo Ji-ha's eyes. After a while, they seemed to leave Seo Joo-Heon's house and walked around her house. Yoo Ji-ha said that it seemed like Irene really liked Seo Joo-Heon, but Seo Joo-Heon rejected it and said that it was just a risk that she accepted. The risk was making the user do something embarrassing, and feeling happy when the relic managed to make the user become embarrassed after what the user did. But Yoo Ji-ha thought that Irene was always like that to Seo Joo-Heon only, even though Yoo Ji-ha previously restrained Irene, who was going to go looking for Seo Joo-Heon, and even though Irene lost her mind, she only did that to Seo Joo-Heon. Because according to Yoo Ji-ha, if what the relic wanted was fun, then doing it with everyone would be more fun. Seo Joo-Heon also agreed with that. Risk occurs based on the deep desire of the user himself, and it is true what Yoo Ji-ha said: if someone does not have a desire, then there will be nothing that can be channeled by the risk. Seo Joo-Heon then thought that the reason for Irene who did it was not because she was a pervert, but because she liked Seo Joo-Heon. But in his heart, Seo Joo-Heon felt a little grateful that Irene did not do it with someone else. They continued their journey with Yoo Ji-ha teasing Seo Joo-Heon, who had done all kinds of things with risk Irene. Yoo Ji-ha was waiting for the time when they would go on a date, but it was rejected by Seo Joo-Heon. And now there was a golden relic that was angry at being kicked out of its own house. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard that, did not care about it and removed the relic from the water pipe of Ji-yoon's house. Ji-yoon, who saw that her problem had been resolved thanks to the help of Seo Joo-Heon, thanked him for helping her. Seo Joo-Heon would take the relic with him. The relic was called gold nuggets, thrown by the brothers of Tugumtan. In the Goryeo dynasty, two brothers took 2 pieces of gold during their journey and divided them equally. When they got to their ship to cross the river, one of the brothers took one of the gold and threw it into the river. When the other brother asked why he did that, the brother who threw the gold said if they didn't go together now, he would have gotten to golds. But after he threw the gold, he felt relieved, and hearing his brother's statement, the other brother threw his gold into the river as well, and Tugumtan would later be known as gold thrown from a fairy. Seo Joo-Heon tried to analyze the relic, and after he got the results, he offered if Ji-yoon wanted to have it, because if he wanted it then Seo Joo-Heon would give him money instead of giving the relic, but Ji-yoon refused. Seo Joo-Heon also asked about the loan made by Ji-yoon because Seo Joo-Heon sent him money, but Ji-yoon said that she never used the money given by Seo Joo-Heon because Gunwoo said that Seo Joo-Heon had worked hard to earn all the money, and they intended to give the money to Seo Joo-Heon when she got married. But a transfer was made by Seo Joo-Heon to Ji-yoon's account, which made Ji-yoon very surprised because she received 100 million won. Yoo Ji-ha just watched their interaction. He was jealous because Seo Joo-Heon was very good to Ji-yoon and not with him. And when Gunwoo went home, they had dinner together, and after that, Seo Joo-Heon went home to his house when the night was late. Seo Joo-Heon returned home, and when she opened the door to her room, she saw someone hiding on her bed using her blanket. Seo Joo-Heon was annoyed and thought it was a rope relic, but when she told her to leave, the person inside did not budge, and Seo Joo-Heon approached the mattress and pulled back the blanket while accusing Dalji and telling her to leave. But when the blanket was opened, what she saw now was Irene, who was fast asleep. Seo Joo-Heon was very surprised to see Irene sleeping on her mattress. Why would Irene be on Seo Joo-Heon's bed? And what would happen to them? Irene was seen sleeping in Seo Joo-Heon's room quietly. Seo Joo-Heon, who was confused, did not want to wake Irene, because Seo Joo-Heon thought that Irene was here thanks to the risk she was experiencing. And it was true what Seo Joo-Heon thought. If Irene's risk had not ended even after Irene kissed Seo Joo-Heon's neck before. Seo Joo-Heon enveloped Irene again and was about to leave the room, but unlucky for her, Irene woke up and saw Seo Joo-Heon, who wanted to leave. Irene was very happy to see Seo Joo-Heon in the room, and when Seo Joo-Heon was about to leave, before she could hold the doorknob, a spark of aura prevented her from opening the door. Seo Joo-Heon saw this. Surprised when she turned around, she could see Irene had used her power to prevent her from leaving. Seo Joo-Heon was a little scared and panicked now. She asked Irene to be calmer now, but it didn't seem to work, seeing Irene, who was getting closer to her. And suddenly, the relic Bian Kang So appeared in front of her and was about to worsen her situation. And before they did anything, Seo Joo-Heon quickly threw them out of the window in annoyance. But when she was unprepared, a hand was on the side of her face and pulled her in. Seo Joo-Heon screamed for Irene to let go, but unfortunately her body was already on the bed with Irene on top of her, looking at her with full of gaze at Seo Joo-Heon's face. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, became a little panicked because she couldn't do anything now, and a notification window popped up saying that Irene's risk had accumulated and would come out at the same time. Seo Joo-Heon didn't feel that this was a good sign for her, and she recalled her conversation with Yoo Ji-ha a while ago, and the current situation reflected Irene's deep desire, and Seo Joo-Heon had to make her decision now. Now Irene was about to attack Seo Joo-Heon, but before Irene could do that, Seo Joo-Heon moved first and kissed Irene right on her lips. Because Seo Joo-Heon didn't let Irene attack her this time, the relic in Irene's body rebelled because Seo Joo-Heon should have been shy and blushing. And just like what Seo Joo-Heon predicted, when she kissed Irene still, she confirmed her assumption this time that if she attacked first, then the relic would panic, and sure enough, Seo Joo-Heon was satisfied that she was able to upset the relic, but something unexpected happened the next day. Seo Joo-Heon tried to open his eyes and he felt cramped now. Just as he opened his eyes, Seo Joo-Heon was hit by a pure gold bar on his face. Seo Joo-Heon had difficulty moving his limbs because he was buried by the gold that filled the room. Seo Joo-Heon looked around him where there was a lot of gold, money, jewelry, and many other valuable items. Seo Joo-Heon was confused now, and she just realized that Irene was not by her side. Seo Joo-Heon was frantically looking for Irene among the piles of gold, and it seemed that Irene had also been buried in the gold. Seo Joo-Heon was relieved that she had seen Irene, who was fine. A notification window said that Irene could now use the power of her wealth. Seo Joo-Heon smiled happily because she knew that Irene could use another power from her relic that Irene could not use before. Irene had suffered a lot by absorbing the power of the Hand of Midas in the previous tomb, but because of that, Irene's power became well controllable by her. But unlike the relic of bankruptcy that Irene used to use, she couldn't use the Hand of Midas. Midas used to be famous for whatever he touched turned into gold, but Irene couldn't use that power, because that power was sealed by something. Irene tried to get out of the pile of gold with difficulty, but Seo Joo-Heon praised Irene for doing something very useful. Seo Joo-Heon also said that now Irene could use her wealth power now, but Irene rejected Seo Joo-Heon's words because they had tried it several times, but all failed. Seo Joo-Heon finally had to convince Irene if she could use her power now, and casually, Irene suddenly tried her power. Seo Joo-Heon tried to stop her, but it was too late. A gold-colored light shone and gold and other valuables appeared from above like magic. Seo Joo-Heon's room was now filled with dazzling gold light. Yoo Ji-ha and Gunwoo, who happened to come, were surprised when they saw the mountains of gold that filled Seo Joo-Heon's room and even spilled out of the room. Seo Joo-Heon explained that Irene was the one who did all this because now she could use her wealth. Yoo Ji-ha seemed very impressed because of that. But Seo Joo-Heon would show something greater than this and asked Yoo Ji-ha to come with him and Irene to a place far away from Seo Joo-Heon. And in a place far from the residential area, the four people were seen walking deeper into the forest. Gunwoo, who protested because he had been walking for a long time, was told by Seo Joo-Heon not to follow him if he just wanted to protest. But Gunwoo really wanted to see how Seo Joo-Heon used the relic, so he still followed Seo Joo-Heon. And after they walked far enough, Seo Joo-Heon smiled and was about to carry out his plan here. Seo Joo-Heon told Yoo Ji-ha to take out Hoongbu and Nolbu's gourd from Van Gogh, and after the gift given by the crow earlier appeared in front of him, Seo Joo-Heon was about to open it now. Seo Joo-Heon did not dare to open the gift because there would be a possibility that he would get a high level of disaster if he got the Nolbu's gourd. But this time, with the power of Irene, Seo Joo-Heon was sure that he would 100% get the Hoongbu's gourd. Irene seemed to agree with the idea proposed by Seo Joo-Heon. But Yoo Ji-ha didn't accept and said that Seo Joo-Heon was cheating now. But Seo Joo-Heon didn't care about that because the crow didn't say anything to her about doing what Seo Joo-Heon proposed. Because Seo Joo-Heon didn't want to get a high-level disaster, so she tried everything to make it not happen. Seo Joo-Heon glanced at Irene and asked her to use her power on the Hoongbu and Nolbu's gourd. Irene unhesitatingly stretched out her hand and began to use her wealth power as requested by Seo Joo-Heon earlier. Will Seo Joo-Heon's plan succeed this time? What will Seo Joo-Heon get from the gift? Seen Irene, who used her power directly towards the three gourds, and immediately the gourd shone brightly and turned golden. Everyone was surprised to see the gourd that turned golden thanks to the power of Irene. But Yoo Ji-ha seemed to doubt if what changed was only the outer skin while the contents would be the same. But Seo Joo-Heon ignored Yoo Ji-ha's concerns as he tried to open the gourd with his saw. Seo Joo-Heon became more and more convinced that this gourd would turn into something valuable as he had difficulty opening it. But instead of what Seo Joo-Heon expected, the gourd exploded and released another gourd from inside. The number of gourds doubled due to Irene's power. Everyone there was surprised when they saw the huge number of pumpkins now in front of their eyes. Yoo Ji-ha also thought that they would get an unlimited number of pumpkins if they continued to do so. Irene also seemed very happy because her power was successful and was praised by Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon thought about opening the next gourd, but before Seo Joo-Heon could open it, the gourd shone brightly and a silhouette of a person appeared from inside the gourd. They were all surprised when they saw a lot of angels in front of their eyes. Seo Joo-Heon was happy when he hit the jackpot like this. Seo Joo-Heon ordered the angels to get him the best relic and treasure they could get, but the angry response from the angels made Seo Joo-Heon surprised, especially when Seo Joo-Heon saw the angels carrying weapons. Meanwhile, another gourd suddenly exploded and brought out another silhouette from inside. Several horrible monster figures stared at them sharply with weapons in their hands. Yoo Ji-ha and Gunwoo were very surprised when he saw the many goblins that emerged from the gourd, and it seemed that Seo Joo-Heon's plan did not work this time because instead of getting treasure, Seo Joo-Heon saw a lot of monsters and angels who were angry at him, and because the trick had been revealed, they began to attack Seo Joo-Heon and his friends. Seo Joo-Heon could only run away from the monsters, but when he tried to run, one of the monsters suddenly threw his weapon at Seo Joo-Heon. But Seo Joo-Heon managed to avoid the weapon and made the weapon thrown and formed a tree that was beside him. Seo Joo-Heon saw something strange from the weapon, which turned out to be a relic. Seeing that the weapons that the monsters all held were relics, Seo Joo-Heon was not afraid anymore and began to release his strength and summon the relic sword that he always carried. With the relic, Seo Joo-Heon went forward and cut down all the monsters and angels who were chasing him. After defeating them all, Seo Joo-Heon paused for a moment, and he told Irene to use her power to finish them all, and as Seo Joo-Heon ordered, Irene stretched out her hand and used her power to create a huge explosion there, which instantly destroyed all the monsters and angels. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw all the enemies defeated so easily by Irene, smiled happily and praised Irene again. After that, a notification window appeared saying that the goblins and angels had dropped relics with tier S and tier SS. Immediately, all the relics used as weapons fell and scattered on the ground. Seo Joo-Heon also asked his friends to collect the relic, and he thought of opening the next gourd to get more relics, but Yoo Ji-ha thought it was a bad idea because all that appeared was goblins and other monsters, but Seo Joo-Heon did not mind that. Seo Joo-Heon asked Irene if she was okay and could continue. Irene looked fine and was still able to do the next. Shortly after they finished collecting the relic, Yoo Ji-ha and Gunwoo helped Seo Joo-Heon to open the next gourd, and as soon as the monster came out, Irene swiftly finished them all at once with her explosion, and they did it all over and over again until their gourds were finished. Meanwhile, in a skyscraper, there was a collection of figures and posters in someone's room. There was also a game being played by the owner of the room. The owner of the room turned out to be a man wearing a black cat costume and an eye patch with a cat accent clearly visible on his forehead, playing a game. Before his fun was interrupted because someone suddenly entered his room and disrupted his quiet time. The owner of the room was angry because the person who opened the door to his room surprised him. After hearing the apology from the man who surprised him, he went on to report the Catman's drastic drop in market value, and it wasn't just one piece of bad news he heard, as the man went on to report that the Catman's stocks were now worthless. The Catman's hands were seen shaking when he heard the series of bad reports about the loss of all the assets he had, and angrily the Catman shouted at the person to shut up, and after that, the Catman left the room with a little swearing because he knew from his prophecy that Pandora would soon be destroyed, but he did not expect that the destruction would also hit him. And the Catman accused Seo Joo-Heon as the main culprit of the destruction of Pandora, as said in the prophecy he got. Angrily, the Catman opened the door of a room that led him into a dark room and contained fog there. The Catman walked closer to a golden cup in front of him and began to curse Seo Joo-Heon and promised to make him regret for messing up his life because he had the relic of prophecy. Who exactly is this Catman? And how many relics has Seo Joo-Heon collected from the gourd? At a TBM branch office in America, several people were still doing their usual activities before someone in cat pajamas entered the office. His entry attracted the attention of the guards there and tried to stop him. One of the receptionists there looked at the commotion that occurred at the entrance, and when she saw who had come into the office, she was surprised to see that the guards were stopping someone she knew. The receptionist explained to the two guards that the person wearing cat pajamas had a Nostradamus and a Delphi shrine relic, and the identity of the person was Joshua, the fortune teller, also known as the King of Destiny. Meanwhile, with CEO Kwon, who was scolding Richard, now because of what Richard said in the video made by Seo Joo-Heon before, when CEO Kwon threw the cell phone to Richard. A little surprised, but he managed to catch the cell phone and see the video footage of him saying something about CEO Kwon. Richard also made a defense that he had no other choice at that time because he was under the threat of Seo Joo-Heon and chose to do it to survive. But CEO Kwon seemed very angry with Richard. But Richard still defended himself because he only conveyed a little of the ugliness that CEO Kwon did. CEO Kwon was still disappointed with Richard, who sold his name just to save himself, but Richard really had no reason other than to save his life at that time. While they continued to argue, someone had stood at the door of their room and casually kicked the door. CEO Kwon and Richard, who saw Joshua come in, were surprised because it was unusual for this person to come to the office on his own accord. Richard also asked what Joshua needed to come to the TBM office. Joshua smiled when he knew that everyone there was wary of Seo Joo-Heon and persuaded them to do something about it. Joshua had a plan, but he wanted to ask permission from CEO Kwon to borrow one of his people. Joshua also asked for someone named Francisco, a person who was famous for his ability to steal relics. Besides that, Joshua asked that person because he had a relic of begging. But CEO Kwon was confused by why Joshua wanted that person who couldn't even face Seo Joo-Heon directly. Joshua didn't want to fight Seo Joo-Heon directly, but he wanted to fight him in a sneaky and underhanded way, and with that, Joshua also had a plan to take one by one of Seo Joo-Heon's subordinates and make them hostages. CEO Kwon was quite surprised at Joshua, because this time the person was very different from usual, because Joshua was the type of person who would find out the weaknesses of his opponent and attack him right away. CEO Kwon also asked the other purpose of Joshua with his plan. Joshua felt that he was caught off guard, and Joshua also admitted that he could not read the future of Seo Joo-Heon. Initially, Joshua had tried to use the relic, and when he asked the relic to provide information about Seo Joo-Heon, initially, everything went well, with the relic building a space for Joshua to do his divination as usual. But when Joshua tried to sleep and read the future of Seo Joo-Heon, Joshua fell asleep, but he was unable to dream about Seo Joo-Heon. Joshua believed that if he slept in the space of the oracle, then the person he targeted would appear in his dreams. But when he targeted Seo Joo-Heon, he was unable to dream anything. And that's why Joshua planned this. Joshua tried to persuade CEO Kwon to agree with him, because Seo Joo-Heon could not be left alone because he would only make everything chaotic. CEO Kwon also confirmed if Joshua really wanted to use Francisco to carry out the plan, and Joshua was very sure of that. CEO Kwon agreed to the plan from Joshua. Meanwhile, on a peaceful mountain slope, suddenly there was a huge explosion that shattered the tranquility on the mountainside. There were also several human and monster figures that were blown away by the effects of the explosion, while two other silhouettes were seen behind the smoke, and when the smoke subsided, it could be seen Seo Joo-Heon and Irene beside him, who seemed to be doing what they had been doing all along, which was harvesting the gourds. Yoo-Ji-ha still couldn't think of Seo Joo-Heon, who opened all the gourds there and used Irene to fight the monsters there. Yoo-Ji-ha didn't even think that they would be harvesting the gourds all this time. Seo Joo-Heon also thanked Irene for making everything so easy, and Irene was happy to be able to help Seo Joo-Heon. After successfully making the mountains burn, they decided to go home. When they arrived home, they saw Seo Joo-Heon, who was sorting the relic he had just got, while Yoo-Ji-ha, who was tired of seeing Seo Joo-Heon organizing all the relics, asked when Seo Joo-Heon would be finished with all this. Seo Joo-Heon asked again the reason why Yoo-Ji-ha was complaining, and it turned out that Seo Joo-Heon's house was completely filled with relics, which made it difficult to walk. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard Yoo-Ji-ha's complaints, asked him to help Seo Joo-Heon tidy up and sort out all the relics. Yoo Ji-ha had no choice but to help Seo Joo-Heon, and Seo Joo-Heon told Yoo Ji-ha to move the relics that he had tidied up earlier. Yoo Ji-ha agreed even though he looked annoyed at the items that had been tidied up but were still messy in his eyes. Yoo Ji-ha also asked the relic that Seo Joo-Heon could use from all the relics. Seo Joo-Heon was happy because she got a lot of relics with tier S and various types of relics that she got. Yoo Ji-ha was now moving a box full of offense-type relics, and Seo Joo-Heon explained the other relics that she had sorted based on the type of relic itself. But the best items that Seo Joo-Heon got were defense-type relics, such as the brick house of the youngest of the three pigs, and the blood odd the dragon killed by Siegfried. Because until now Seo Joo-Heon felt that if he didn't have defense-type relics before, so they had no choice but to escape. Seo Joo-Heon was satisfied that he got a good relic with the defense type, and while going back to sorting, Seo Joo-Heon found a relic that he couldn't analyze the rank of, which was Odin's Crow, Munin's Tears. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he found a relic that he couldn't see the rank of, because relics like this were usually only given by the Crow. Odin was once said to have a policy as the ruler of Northern European mythology. He had two crows that were tasked with gathering news from all corners of the world every day. His crows had their own names: Hugin, which means mind, and Munin, which means memory. And because the relic belongs to Munin, Seo Joo-Heon thinks if this relic has something to do with someone's memory. Seo Joo-Heon also tried to ask this to the crow, but as usual he didn't get any answers. Seo Joo-Heon chose to keep the relic with him. What exactly is the use of the relic? Does it have anything to do with the past events of Seo Joo-Heon? Since Seo Joo-Heon was getting more relics now, it took her a long time to sort them all out. But there seemed to be another problem that arose. It was shown on the news that a large tomb appeared in Syria, and it seemed to be the third tomb of the 7 great tombs, and it was also told that many excavation teams were already at the tomb. The tomb appeared before they could even do anything, and they would be late even if they used a plane, unlike the previous tomb, where they had prepared in advance and finished the tomb before many people came. This time Seo Joo-Heon and his team realized the tomb late. Seeing Yoo Ji-ha and Irena, who were in a hurry to get everything ready, but Seo Joo-Heon and his team were late to realize the tomb. But Seo Joo-Heon told them to be patient and just watch the news, because even if someone can complete the tomb, Seo Joo-Heon will be able to steal the relic from them. And as they waited and watched the progress, strangely, everything about this tomb was reported in great detail, and it was also reported that there were a lot of fights between fellow team members, which was probably the work of the relic owner of the tomb. While Seo Joo-Heon, who saw it, tried to find out what kind of tomb appeared this time. The next day, Yoo Ji-ha showed something to Seo Joo-Heon. Yoo Ji-ha said that now the news on TV had revealed the identity of the tomb. It turned out that the tomb was the Tomb of Envy and was one of the 7 great tombs. Seo Joo-Heon was a little surprised when he heard the news, but everything makes sense now about the reason why the excavation team members are fighting with each other. And it seems that not only the excavation team members are fighting with each other, because the news media is also doing the same. Seo Joo-Heon believes that they have all been affected by the effects of the tomb. Seeing the news and the effects caused by the tomb, Seo Joo-Heon thought that they didn't need to rush and see the progress, because even if they went in, they would be slowed down by the fighting between their team members. Seo Joo-Heon decided to leave when everything was prepared and told Yoo Ji-ha to repair all the damaged relics first. Yoo Ji-ha protested to Seo Joo-Heon because he had to force himself to work harder to repair all the relics. Suddenly Irene came and asked Seo Joo-Heon to look at the news. Irene said that Richard Jang had almost finished the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon checked the news. Seo Joo-Heon saw Richard there, but it was not what Irene expected. It seemed that Richard was not just silent after what happened at the Golden Palace. All the news broadcasted about it. Irene also asked Seo Joo-Heon whether Richard would really be able to finish it. Seo Joo-Heon asked them to filter the news that was broadcasted because they themselves did not know what really happened there. But Seo Joo-Heon felt a feeling that disturbed him. When night fell, Yoo Ji-ha was seen repairing Seo Joo-Heon's relic. He complained a little because of the many relics he had to repair, and when Yoo Ji-ha complained again, a black shadow enveloped him without him noticing. Yoo Ji-ha turned his head trying to find out, and suddenly an earthquake occurred. All the furniture moved and the walls began to crack. Irene and everyone there panicked because of the sudden earthquake. A notification window appeared saying that someone had been kidnapped. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised to see the notification window, and after the earthquake stopped completely, Seo Joo-Heon was confused because none of them there had been kidnapped. But Seo Joo-Heon realized that if there were other people besides them who were there, Seo Joo-Heon hurriedly checked on Yoo Ji-ha, and after Seo Joo-Heon got there, Yoo Ji-ha had disappeared along with the relic. Meanwhile, at the place where the big tomb was, it was seen that Yoo Ji-ha fell from above and hit the floor of the cave. Yoo Ji-ha was in pain at first, but he quickly got up to see what really happened. Even the relics fell together with him. And Yoo Ji-ha also used Vingo to store all the relics there. His cell phone was even dead, now making Yoo Ji-ha really unable to contact anyone. Yoo Ji-ha also assumed that he was now in a tomb even though he didn't want this assumption to be true. Yoo Ji-ha walked slowly, and the deeper he was, Yoo Ji-ha saw a glowing cave there. Yoo Ji-ha was very scared now because the cave was very dark, and suddenly the rope relic surprised him who was scared there. Seeing the rope relic, Yoo Ji-ha asked him to help find a way out of the tomb. But the rope relic refused and instead asked him to find a way out of the tomb. And suddenly, the rope relic surprised himself who was scared there. Seeing the rope relic, Yoo Ji-ha asked him to help find a way out of the tomb. But the rope relic refused and instead hit Yoo Ji-ha. And the further he walked now, Yoo Ji-ha arrived at a magnificent place and looked like a palace. As soon as Yoo Ji-ha entered, he heard a loud sound that made his ears buzzing. The sound came from a relic that resembled a musician with 3 heads and 6 hands playing musical instruments. The relic was angry and made his voice louder, making Yoo Ji-ha unable to hear the sound that pierced his eardrums. The rope relic tried to awaken Yoo Ji-ha, or he would be completed by the relic, but seeing Yoo Ji-ha not listening to what was said, the rope relic wrapped Yoo Ji-ha's body and pulled him away from the relic, but the relic pursued them. Yoo Ji-ha opened his eyes a little and he could see some musical instruments played by the relic. Yoo Ji-ha thought of a plan in his head to escape from all this. But the relic got closer to him and chased him with a scary look on his face, making Yoo Ji-ha scared and shouted for help, hoping that Seo Joo-Heon would save him. Will Yoo Ji-ha survive? And will Seo Joo-Heon help Yoo Ji-ha? The relic continued to chase Yoo Ji-ha, who tried to escape from his presence. Along the hallway they chased each other until the rope relic entered an open room with bright lights. The rope relic quickly turned to enter the room. After they managed to enter, the rope relic quickly closed the door and held it so that the relic who was chasing him could not enter the room. After that, the rope relic released Yoo Ji-ha just like that. Yoo Ji-ha, who wanted to protest, was stopped by the rope relic, who told him or they would be caught by the relic who was chasing him. And sure enough, the relic who chased them before lost the rope relic and Yoo Ji-ha, and now he is still looking for their whereabouts. Seeing the relic passing through a large door, which is the hiding place of Yoo Ji-ha now, calmly they both try to peek out and see the situation. And when they saw that the relic was gone, Yoo Ji-ha threw himself to the floor and lay down. He was still confused why the owner of this tomb was walking around like that. Yoo Ji-ha became hesitant and afraid when he didn't know how to get out of the tomb when the owner kept walking. His cell phone died and he couldn't contact Seo Joo-Heon. Yoo Ji-ha asked the rope relic to do something to ask Seo Joo-Heon to come here by telepathy, but the rope relic didn't seem to know how to do that. But Yoo Ji-ha said that all relics can make contact with each other, and with that he hopes that the rope relic can do the same. Yoo Ji-ha gasped as an idea entered his head. It seemed like he was going to use the relic's communication network and ask the rope relic to do it. But because Yoo Ji-ha's voice was so loud, the relic that chased them earlier found their hiding place. And with that, the rope relic returned to take the panicked Yoo Ji-ha away. Meanwhile, in the place where Seo Joo-Heon is now, Seo Joo-Heon is still checking all his relics, and it turns out that some of Seo Joo-Heon's relics also disappeared along with Yoo Ji-ha. Seo Joo-Heon realized that the missing relics were relics that they used very often. Irene became worried because some of her relics disappeared, and she asked Seo Joo-Heon to try to summon her relics. But when Seo Joo-Heon wanted to summon her relics, she was unable to do so because something was blocking Seo Joo-Heon from communicating due to the power of the Tomb of Envy. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the notification window, used his relic map to find out where Yoo Ji-ha and his relic were actually located. After that, Seo Joo-Heon asked Irene to prepare for their departure to the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon used Yoo Ji-ha's jacket to his relic map to find the location of Yoo Ji-ha himself. But before he got the results, his cell phone received a call, and when Seo Joo-Heon answered the call, a familiar voice from the other side knew his anxiety. Richard Jang said that Yoo Ji-ha had disappeared, and he also said that after Seo Joo-Heon lost Yoo Ji-ha, then he would not be able to repair his own relic with it. Seo Joo-Heon made an angry face when he found out that Richard was the one behind the kidnapping of Yoo Ji-ha. Richard laughed and confirmed the accusation from Seo Joo-Heon to him. Richard had thrown Yoo Ji-ha directly into the Tomb of Envy. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he heard that from Richard. He didn't know if Yoo Ji-ha could survive alone in that terrible tomb. And at the same time, Seo Joo-Heon saw a dot on his map showing that Yoo Ji-ha was still alive there. Richard spoke to Seo Joo-Heon again. Richard began to make offers to Seo Joo-Heon, and if Seo Joo-Heon agreed, then he would take Yoo Ji-ha out directly from the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon said what Richard wanted. Immediately, Richard smiled, and he asked Seo Joo-Heon to tell him about the strength of Seo Joo-Heon, who easily completed the tomb with a small team member. Richard also asked Seo Joo-Heon to tell the secret behind it. When he heard that, Seo Joo-Heon laughed loudly, and it managed to make Richard upset because Seo Joo-Heon was laughing at him. Seo Joo-Heon laughed because Richard could get Yoo Ji-ha in and out of the high-difficulty Tomb of Envy, but he couldn't steal the relic from Seo Joo-Heon's residence now. Seo Joo-Heon also confirmed that his team might not be as much as Pandora's team, and even his team didn't have the protection of politicians and the government. Even his team does not have financial support from the government or even the country, and all he has is his relic. Seo Joo-Heon knows that Pandora has conducted an investigation about the relic he has. Seo Joo-Heon said to Richard, and guessed that Richard did this because maybe Seo Joo-Heon could solve the tomb easily thanks to the relic. And it seemed like Seo Joo-Heon's guess was right, seeing that Ricard was now upset. But Seo Joo-Heon mocked Richard because he should have stolen his relic and not Yoo Ji-ha's, because it would be much more troublesome for Seo Joo-Heon because he used his relic to complete the tomb and not Yoo Ji-ha. But Seo Joo-Heon already knew why Richard couldn't do that was because Richard thought that there was one relic that could only be used by Seo Joo-Heon, but because Richard didn't know what that relic was, so he stole the relic. Seo Joo-Heon also said that even someone as powerful as CEO Kwon was helpless in front of Anubis at that time. Richard didn't know what relic could give Seo Joo-Heon that kind of power, and he was afraid of coming face to face with him. And that's why kidnapping Yoo Ji-ha was something that Richard did to get the attention of Seo Joo-Heon, and he could negotiate by using Yoo Ji-ha as his hostage and taking information from Seo Joo-Heon. And Richard also thought that everything would go well because later he would get Seo Joo-Heon's relic in his hands. Seo Joo-Heon, who knew all that, said that Richard couldn't even get Yoo Ji-ha out of the tomb at first. Richard panicked because Seo Joo-Heon knew that, but hearing that Richard would get Yoo Ji-ha out by relying on Pandora to finish the tomb, Seo Joo-Heon was angry at Richard because when Pandora did it, Yoo Ji-ha might not survive. Seo Joo-Heon also threatened Pandora to be careful because she had dealt with Seo Joo-Heon. After that, Seo Joo-Heon turned off her call, and when she finished with her call, Nero called Seo Joo-Heon and said that Seo Joo-Heon had continued her novel now. Seo Joo-Heon, who was confused, did not know what happened. And then Nero showed a sheet with writing on it. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised to see the message that was there. The message was written by Yoo Ji-ha, using the relic communication network to support him. Nero also smiled smugly because he thought that Seo Joo-Heon would continue his novel. But in contrast to Seo Joo-Heon, who praised Yoo Ji-ha because he acted well,